What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, this is the Sweet Life 813, where we talk about gig content, mainly Uber Eats and just everyday life topics. I know it's been a while since I've put out any content, but I'm back and ready to get back on a schedule and put out content more regularly. So we're going to get right back into it. So I've been watching a lot of other content creators, and one thing I think that people haven't really touched on a lot as far as gig work is the wear and tear on your vehicles. So I'm gonna tell you a little bit about my experience with the wear and tear on my vehicles as I've done Uber Eats, just so you get an idea of what it could be like if you're thinking about getting into the gig industry and then what you can expect. So I've been doing Uber Eats for about 2.5 years now, and I started off doing Uber Eats as more of a part-time thing. I had a 9 to 5 job, and I would usually go out and do Uber Eats in the evenings and on the weekends. Then this past May, I was laid off from my 9 to 5 job. So from this past May until now, I've been doing Uber Eats full time, and I definitely see a lot of difference in the wear and tear on your vehicles doing it more full time than just part time. So when I first started doing Uber Eats, I had a 2014 Kia Optima EX Hybrid, and that vehicle was pretty good at first. It did help save on gas. If you know anything about hybrids, they switch between gas and the electric battery, so it helps you save on gas when you're driving around a lot. So in the beginning, it worked out very well, but um, in driving the car a lot, I did start to have some issues with that vehicle. I mean, I had to get the brakes done on that vehicle, which that's just a normal maintenance thing with the brakes. But after driving for a while, one day I started noticing the hybrid warning light coming on. And at first, I didn't really think much of it or feel like I needed to do anything urgently. But after I continued to drive it for a while, one day I was out, and I think I was actually on a delivery, to be honest with you, and the hybrid battery warning light came on, and I was driving, and all of a sudden I noticed that when I was driving, even though I was pressing the gas, the vehicle wasn't accelerating like it should. It was starting to slow down, so I ended up pulling over. And once I pulled over, I the vehicle eventually just stopped and turned off and wouldn't turn on again. So I had to have it towed home. I had to use AAA, have it towed home. And then I think the next day I probably called into my job and had it towed to the Kia dealership. And they took a look at it and they said, yeah, your hybrid battery is bad. One of the cells has gone out in the battery, so you're going to need a whole new hybrid battery. And they quoted me $9,000 for a new um, hybrid battery for the vehicle. So, I mean, who has $9,000 at one time just to put into a battery for a vehicle? Plus, the vehicle probably wasn't even worth $9,000 itself. So, fortunately, the dealership was nice enough to let me leave the vehicle there for a few days while I decided what I was going to do. So, I did some research, went online, and I found a company that they uh, will come and install hybrid batteries for you, and Um, it's a lot cheaper than getting it from the dealership, and they even include a warranty. So I talked to them, and they said they would do it for 3,000, including a warranty. So I talked to my mom about it, and she helped me with it, and we went ahead and made an appointment for them to come fix it. And of course, the dealership wasn't going to allow them to fix it on their property. So the guy from the dealership actually came out, and they actually helped me push the car like over next to the dealership into a plaza that was right next to the dealership. And the guy from the hybrid company actually came to the parking lot in the plaza where my car was one day, and he actually changed the battery right there in the parking lot. They had to take out the back seat because the hybrid battery is located between the back seat and the trunk in that little space. So they had to take out the back seat and take out the hybrid battery and put another battery in. And he did all that right there in the parking lot. Probably took like, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes for him to do everything. And then once he did that, the vehicle came back on and started up, and I was able to drive off. And I thought everything was good, but I think within like a couple of days, the hybrid warning light started coming back on again. So I contacted the place again, and they sent the same guy out, and he looked at it, and um, he put another battery in, and the second battery he put in drove for a little while and started doing the same thing again. And not to mention, before he put the second battery in, I think I had to wait a few days for him to get the second battery and put it back in, put the second one in. Then the next time I called, they said that, oh, it was probably the brand of hybrid battery that they use. So they said they would order me a different brand of hybrid battery to put in there. And I had to wait like a week for that hybrid battery to come in, and then they had to schedule someone to come out and put it in. It was a different person this last time. So I was already upset because I had to go like over a week without a vehicle, having to, depend on my mom to take me to work and depend on my wife to do things. And so it was just crazy at the time. But they put the new brand hybrid battery in, and that fixed the problem. And I drove it for a little while, but then that vehicle started having more issues, and I ended up getting rid of that vehicle, and I ended up getting a 2018 Chevy Cruze. Now, with the Chevy Cruze, I decided that I'm not gonna use that vehicle for Uber Eats. That I'd rather just use my wife's vehicle for Uber Eats, which she has a 2018 Chevy Trax, which is like a small SUV. So I decided I'd rather use that for Uber Eats instead of the Cruze. So once I started driving the Chevy Trax for Uber Eats, after a while I started having problems with that vehicle. The air condition went out. It started having an issue where if you're sitting in idle for a long time, sometimes the car would turn off. Um, Also needed the brakes done on that one. So, and also I think there was like a fuel pump or water pump issue as well. So, fortunately, that vehicle was still under warranty. So I was able to take that to a place that I had been before, and they did all of that work under warranty. It was probably over 2,000, like $2,500 worth of work, but warranty covered most of that, so that was fine. Um, Now, recently, I've started having trouble with the tracks where there was a leak, a coolant leak. And when I first took it in, they looked at the vehicle and determined that it was the hose clamp. So they put a new hose clamp on, and I thought, okay, that um, took care of the issue. But about 2 weeks later, after the hose clamp was put on, and keep in mind, I'm driving full time now. About 2 weeks later, I get a overheating warning again on the vehicle, and I pull over and check it, and there's like hardly any coolant in there. So I take it back over to the place, and they look at it again, and they put the pressure sensor on there to try to find any leaks, and the guy said they weren't able to find any leaks on there. You know, he put a camera in the engine and looked at the pistons and said there was no leak inside of the engine, because if there was a leak in there, that would mean that there was a bad head gasket. So they weren't able to find anything like that. And he just told me to keep an eye on it and keep adding coolant, and eventually the leak would get worse, and then maybe they'd be able to pinpoint it exactly where it is. So I did that, and maybe a couple weeks later, I was driving one night, and all of a sudden I started seeing smoke come out from under the hood. And when I got home, I looked at it, and it looked under the hood, and the coolant had been spraying inside the hood, because it was like wet under there. So I took this to a different shop, and they looked at it, and they said that part of the container that holds the coolant at the top had broken. And they said it was probably because when the other shop put the hose clamp on, it looks like they put it on too tight, and it broke part of the container. So they replaced the container, put a whole new container in there, and said, that's probably the issue now. But after they did that, I've been looking at the coolant, and there's still some kind of leak in there. Like every other day or something, I'm having to add coolant to it. So it's still a mystery right now as to what the final issue is. Another thing is that the front two tires were really bad on there from driving a lot, so I had to get two new tires and also a front end alignment recently, which I did that. So I mean, the car drives pretty well. It's just this coolant issue, just having to add the coolant to keep it going. But hopefully, we'll find out soon exactly what that issue is. But I said all that to say that when you get into gig work, you need to be prepared for the wear and tear on your vehicle. That's why I say that if you're gonna do gig work, it's best to do it, as a side hustle, and really pay attention to the orders you're taking to try to limit how many miles you're driving, and at least make it worth it when you're making your money. You don't want to drive for a large amount of miles for a small amount of money, because that's not worth it for you. So you got to be prepared for that, because driving all this extra time is going to put extra wear and tear on your vehicle. It's going to cause things to go wrong. You're going to have to get oil changes a lot sooner than you normally would, because I got an oil change, like, feels like not that long ago, a few weeks ago, and um, my oil change percentage in the vehicle is already down to like maybe 40%, 30-40% already. So shoot, the way I drive, probably with it, another month and a half or so, it's probably going to be time to change it again. So it's just things you have to keep in perspective when you do Uber Eats and other delivery type gig work, or even just driving people for regular Uber or Lyft. When you're going to drive the car a lot, there's going to be a lot of maintenance or a lot of wear and tear that's going to happen, and that's a normal thing. So just take that in consideration when you're deciding what kind of car you want to drive. You might want to not necessarily want to drive the newest car you have. I mean, if you have multiple vehicles, try to drive, an older vehicle if you can, so that you don't older, but a vehicle still in good shape. so that you don't have to put all that mileage and wear and tear on your new vehicle. Um, but I felt like this needed to be talked about because I don't really see people really talking too much about that, and people need to think about that when they decide if they're going to get into the gig work industry. So I just wanted to touch on that. If you have any questions or comments about your experiences with wear and tear as a gig driver, definitely comment, um, like, and subscribe. Definitely will be back more often with more content. Try to keep this channel growing and see where I can go with it. But yeah, definitely let me know your thoughts and um, how you feel about the weight maintenance and wear and tear in your vehicles. That's all I have for you today. And just stay tuned for more content. See you in the next one.